All right, everybody, welcome back for another deep dive. You ready to jump in today?
Absolutely. I'm excited for this one.
So today we're tackling performance management. And, well, to be honest, when I first heard that topic, I wasn't exactly jumping for joy. Spreadsheets and metrics, it didn't exactly scream behavior analysis.
Right, I get that. But trust me, this is way more exciting than it sounds.
Okay, I'm all ears. Convince me.
Well, first, let's set the stage. We're taking our cues from Chapter 3 of Performance Management, changing behavior that drives organizational effectiveness.
But catchy title.
Right. And this chapter kicks off with a bold statement: all organizational results are the product of human behavior.
Okay, wait, stop right there.
Yeah.
So you're saying like every spreadsheet, every sales report, every win or loss a company experiences, it all boils down to how people act.
Exactly. Every decision, every interaction, every single behavior shapes those outcomes.
That's a pretty powerful way to look at it.
Yeah.
It's like saying the human element is the secret sauce in this whole business recipe.
You could say that. And if we want to improve those results, those numbers, we have to go beyond just crunching data. We need to understand and change the behaviors that are driving those numbers.
So like instead of just looking at the end product, the finished cake, we need to understand the recipe, the individual ingredients and how they're mixed together.
Precisely. It's like being a detective. You wouldn't try to solve a case just by looking at the crime scene after the fact, right? You'd want to know what actions led up to the event.
Yeah, makes sense. You'd miss all the crucial clues if you only focused on the end result.
Exactly. So instead of playing catch-up, we need to be proactive. Figure out those key behaviors and then manage them.
But haven't businesses always been trying to improve results?
Yeah.
What's different about this approach?
You're right. They're always looking for that edge. But historically, the focus has been on things like downsizing, restructuring, or even changing hiring practices.
And those things don't really work.
Well, they might seem like solutions on the surface, but they often miss the mark.
Because they're not addressing the root of the issue, which is behavior.
Exactly. Think about it. Billions of dollars are spent on strategies that don't address the real problem, how people are actually behaving day to day.
And that's where our ABA expertise comes in, right? We know how to analyze and change behavior.
Absolutely. This is where we can truly shine. The real magic happens when we understand that it's not about changing people. It's about changing behavior.
Ooh, I like where this is going. So how do we actually make that happen? How do we bridge that gap between traditional business thinking and this behavior-focused approach?
Well, first, we need to make sure we're all speaking the same language. And that starts with understanding what we really mean by results.
Yeah, when I hear results, I automatically think bottom line profits, sales figures, that sort of thing.
Right. And that's not wrong. But it's incomplete. In performance management, results are really the outcomes of specific processes.
Okay. So it's not just about the final destination. It's about the journey, how we get there.
Precisely. It's how the sausage gets made, so to speak. Each step, each action contributes to that final product.
So it's less about managing the end result and more about managing the behaviors that create it.
You got it. And speaking of getting things right, the chapter shares this great story about Dr. Odiorn and a vice president who's struggling to meet expectations.
Oh, yeah, I remember this one. The mystery of the vague instructions. It really highlights how focusing on results alone can backfire.
Absolutely. The company president had certain expectations but refused to communicate them clearly. So the VP was left guessing, trying to figure out what behaviors would actually lead to those desired outcomes.
I can only imagine how frustrating that would be. It's like trying to solve a puzzle without all the pieces.
Exactly. And it really underscores the importance of clear communication and well-defined goals in any organization.
It makes you wonder how many workplace conflicts could be avoided with just a little bit of behavioral clarity.
Right. It's all about setting everyone up for success. But it's not just about getting results, is it? We also want to make sure those results are achieved in the right way.
You mean ethic?
Exactly. Businesses today are putting more and more emphasis on ethics and values. And guess what ethical concerns are really all about?
Well, I'd say they're about making sure we're not cutting corners or stepping on others just to reach that bottom line.
You nailed it. Ethical concerns are all about achieving results through ethical behaviors. If you want ethical outcomes, you need to manage the behaviors that lead to them.
So instead of hoping people will just magically do the right thing, we need to create a culture that encourages and supports those ethical behaviors.
Precisely. And that's where our expertise as ABA professionals can really make a difference. Now, here's a thought-provoking question for you and our listeners. Have you ever considered that behavior, as crazy as it seems sometimes, is actually quite predictable?
Wait, predictable? Is that a bit of an oxymoron? I mean, we work with humans. They're notoriously unpredictable.
I hear you. But remember, the chapter points out this really interesting idea. It says the best predictor of what people will do today is what they did yesterday.
Hmm. So you're saying there are patterns.
Hmm.
We can actually anticipate certain behaviors based on past actions.
Exactly. It doesn't mean people can't change, but it does mean that their behavior follows certain principles, just like the laws of physics.
Okay, now you got my attention. You're saying there are laws of behavior.
You bet. And just like understanding gravity doesn't change how it works, understanding these laws doesn't change how behavior works, but it gives us the power to predict and influence behavior more effectively.
And isn't that what we do every day as ABA professionals? We're like behavior detectives, analyzing those patterns and figuring out how to shape them.
Precisely.
Hmm.
We use those behavioral principles to understand why people do what they do, and then we help them learn new skills and change unwanted behaviors. It's all connected.
It is. It's fascinating. And you know what this reminds me of? Deming's 4Ms?
Yeah.
That framework for understanding process variation?
Materials, machinery, methods, and manpower. I love that you brought that up.
Yeah, it's a classic. But you know what's interesting about Deming? He was this total quality guru, but even he didn't fully appreciate the role of behavior.
That's a great point. Organizations tend to focus so much on the first three M's, the tangible stuff, that they often neglect the manpower element.
The human factor.
Exactly. And that's all about behavior. How people use those tools, how they interact, how their actions shape the entire process.
So it's not just about having the right equipment or the fanciest technology. It's about the people using those things and how their behavior impacts the outcome.
Exactly. And this is where our ABA knowledge becomes incredibly valuable. We understand how to analyze and improve performance by focusing on those key behaviors.
It's like we're bringing the human element back into the equation.
Yeah.
And in a way that's data-driven and effective.
Absolutely. We're not just relying on intuition or guesswork. We're using our understanding of behavior to create real, lasting change.
This is making me rethink my whole perspective on performance management. It's not just about numbers and spreadsheets. It's about understanding people. And that's something I could definitely get behind.
I knew you would. And trust me, we've only just scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore in this fascinating world of performance management and behavior analysis.
Okay, so we've established that behavior is like this key ingredient in the performance management recipe. But how do we actually put this knowledge into practice? Can you give us like a real-world example?
Absolutely. Let's say we're working with a company that's struggling with low employee morale.
Okay, classic problem.
Yeah.
How can we use this behavior-focused approach to tackle that?
Well, instead of just, throwing a pizza party or hoping for the best, we can put on our ABA hats and take a more targeted approach.
Okay, so less pepperoni, more pinpointing.
Exactly. We start by looking at the actual behaviors that are associated with low morale. Are employees showing up late? Are they missing deadlines? Are there more interpersonal conflicts than usual? Things we can actually observe and measure.
Gotcha. So we're not just relying on gut feelings or vague impressions.
Right. We're looking for concrete evidence. And then once we've identified those behaviors, we can start analyzing the environment. What's happening before those behaviors occur? What are the antecedents? And what happens after the consequences?
So we're talking about understanding the function of the behavior, classic ABA.
Precisely. By figuring out why those behaviors are happening, we can develop interventions that actually address the root cause. Maybe there's a lack of positive reinforcement, or maybe tasks and expectations are unclear, or maybe there are skill deficits that need to be addressed.
So instead of just telling people to be more positive, we're actually creating a workplace environment that encourages and supports those positive behaviors.
Exactly. It's about setting people up for success. But remember, lasting behavior change doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, consistency, and ongoing evaluation. We need to constantly measure the impact of our interventions and be willing to adjust them as needed.
That makes sense. It's not a one-and-done kind of thing.
Nope. It's an ongoing process of observation, measurement, and refinement.
But this approach seems so much more effective than just, hoping for the best or relying on those vague motivational speeches. It's about data. It's about analysis. It's about really understanding the individual and the environment they're in.
It's a much more empowering approach for both the organization and the employees. And here's the best part. It's not limited to just the workplace.
Oh, really? So you're saying we can use this behavior change magic outside of the office walls, too?
Absolutely. Think about your personal goals. Maybe you want to eat healthier or exercise more regularly or finally learn that new skill you've been putting off.
Ooh, guilty as charged on all of those.
We all have those aspirations. But by breaking those goals down into specific measurable behaviors and analyzing the factors influencing those behaviors, we can create personalized plans for success.
So instead of just saying, I'm going to eat better, I could say, I'm going to pack a healthy lunch 3 times a week. and then figure out what might help me achieve that goal, like maybe prepping my meals on Sundays or finding some healthy recipes that I actually enjoy.
Exactly. You're using those same ABA principles, analyzing the antecedents and consequences, reinforcing those desired behaviors, and setting yourself up for success.
It's amazing how these principles can be applied in so many different areas. From boosting workplace morale to achieving those personal goals, it really shows the power and versatility of ABA.
It does. But I'm curious, are there any potential challenges or downsides to applying these principles in performance management? I mean, it almost sounds too good to be true.
That's a great question. Like any powerful tool, ABA principles need to be used responsibly and ethically. One challenge is making sure our interventions are truly respecting individual autonomy. We don't want to create a system that feels coercive or manipulative.
That's a really important point. We need to be mindful of that balance between achieving organizational goals and honoring the well-being of the individuals within that organization.
So can you give us an example of what that might look like in a workplace setting? Like what would be a not so ethical application of these principles?
Let's say a company wants to increase employee productivity. While it's great to identify and reinforce desired behaviors, we need to be careful about creating a system that feels punitive or overly controlling.
Right. It shouldn't be about forcing people to work faster or longer hours just to earn a reward. It's about creating an environment where people feel motivated to do their best work because they feel valued and respected.
Exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot where everyone benefits. Another important consideration is the potential for unintended consequences.
Ooh, unintended consequences. That
Mm.
sounds ominous. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, sometimes when we focus on reinforcing one specific behavior, we might unintentionally discourage other valuable behaviors.
Oh, that makes sense. It's like that saying, when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure.
We need to think holistically and consider how our interventions might impact the overall work environment and the individuals within that environment.
So can you give us an example of what that might look like in a real-world setting?
Sure. Imagine a company that implements a reward system solely for meeting sales quotas. While that might lead to a short-term boost in sales, it could also lead to employees neglecting other important aspects of their jobs, like building relationships with customers or collaborating effectively with their team members.
So it's like creating tunnel vision. We're so focused on one specific outcome that we lose sight of the bigger picture.
That's a great way to put it. We need to be mindful of those potential pitfalls. And that's why ongoing assessment and open communication are so crucial.
Right. It's about being flexible and responsive and always willing to course correct if things aren't going as planned.
Absolutely. And by approaching performance management with this thoughtful and ethical lens, we can harness the power of ABA to create positive and sustainable change while also safeguarding the well-being of everyone involved.
It sounds like data collection is key for this whole performance management thing,
Yeah.
to make sure we're on the right track and all.
Absolutely. We can't just set things in motion and hope for the best, right?
All right, got to keep our eyes on the prize. But what kind of data are we talking about here? Is it all about those spreadsheets and metrics?
Well, those quantitative data like sales figures or productivity reports are definitely important, but they only tell part of the story.
Well, there's more. Okay, I'm intrigued.
What else is there? We also need to gather qualitative data, the stuff you can't easily capture in a spreadsheet.
Ah, the human element. I knew it.
Exactly. Think about employee surveys, interviews, or even just observing people in the workplace.
So it's about getting a feel for the vibe. What's actually happening on the ground.
You got it. These methods allow us to understand employee perceptions, see things from their point of view. And that can help us identify potential roadblocks or areas where we need to make adjustments.
It makes sense. It's like getting the full picture instead of just looking at a snapshot.
Exactly. Remember, human behavior is complex and dynamic. It's influenced by so many different factors.
And as ABA professionals, we're like experts at untangling those factors, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We have that behavior analyst lens that allows us to break down complex situations into observable behaviors and then identify those environmental influences.
It's like we have a superpower. And we can use it to help organizations create workplaces that are not just productive, but also, places where people actually thrive.
Exactly. It's about creating an environment that's supportive, engaging, and fulfilling for everyone.
Wow. This has been such an eye-opening deep dive.
Yeah.
I came into this thinking performance management was all about numbers and spreadsheets. But it's so much more than that. It's about understanding people and behavior.
Yeah.
And that's something I'm really passionate about.
I'm so glad to hear that. And remember, the learning never stops. The field of ABA is constantly evolving, so there's always more to discover.
That's true. And this conversation has definitely sparked some new ideas for me.
Mm.
What if we could shift the focus in organizations from just achieving results to really creating a culture of positive behavior change?
No, that's a powerful thought.
Imagine the impact that could have on employee morale, job satisfaction, and even the overall success of the organization.
It's definitely something worth striving for, and it highlights the incredible potential for ABA to make a real difference in the world.
Well said. So to all our listeners out there, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep using your ABA superpowers to make the world a better place. And we'll see you next time for another deep dive.